When you live long enough in a foreign country, there are tons of things you come to love. But there are also tons of things that you come to dislike. So in this video, I'm going to tell you everything I've come to dislike after more than 10 years of living here in Ecuador. And remember, all of this is based on the experiences that I've had while living here. So you might not dislike these things, especially if you only visited Ecuador for a very short amount of time. But nevertheless, everyone has their own opinions, so make sure to listen in and see what you think about the situation. So let's begin. There's a lot of things that I really don't get about the government. There always seems to be a push to improve the economic situation of the country, but at the same time you hear that any government official is stealing money from the country. So what's the point? While corruption might be something that you might experience in your country as well, it's something that I and various Ecuadorians who have been living here for the longest really don't like. Just to put more of a micro example, in the city where I'm living in right now, Puerto Viejo to be precise, there were tons of years where the mayor seemed to have done nothing at all for the city. Like literally when I got here, the streets had tons of holes in them. They were covered in dust. Lighting and traffic signals were terrible. It was just a mess. But in the most recent years, we've had the good fortune, and I can't believe I have to say it like that because it should technically be an obligation, that we had a good mayor who's done incredible changes for the city. And even then, people are somehow able to criticize him. Probably because people want more than parks, and apparently good streets aren't enough for them. But if they take a step back and look at how things were before, the change is incredible. That's a positive example for this city. When talking about the government as a whole, you always hear about projects that cost a ton of money, but supposedly the funds for those projects don't all get spent in the project. There's always rumors that the higher ups take the money, the majority anyways, and they spend the minimum amount possible on the project. And then there's always the confusing rumors about what happened with the president we had a few years ago, President Rafael Correa, who supposedly stole a whole bunch of money from the country, but at the same time constructed a whole bunch of things that had never been constructed before. Major highways, hospitals, even special schools. Much different from the ones that we normally see here. But there's always this conflicting talk from one side of people who say he stole this and he did that, and the other side of people who are really grateful for what he did. It's all really confusing. You really don't know who to believe. But it just goes to show how much distrust there is in the government. And while I was gonna end it off on that note, I almost did forget to mention that government officials are generally paid too much to do apparently nothing. And people complain about that all the time. I don't like it because it doesn't seem fair, since as a teacher and with tons of friends who are teachers, and our salaries being the minimum wage, which is at about $425 now, and of course some having a little bit more than that, it just seems crazy to us that people in government positions earn thousands of dollars for doing nothing. And sometimes some of them don't even need to have a university degree. We could talk about the government all day, but just understand that there's a ton of reasons why I and various Ecuadorians dislike the government. Delinquency has become so bad that it's become a joke here in Ecuador. I'm not even kidding. I've seen tons of posts about the situation in Guayaquil, and I've even had a conversation with a friend who keeps telling me that going to Guayaquil is just horrible now. And while what I just said does emphasize Guayaquil quite a lot, I'm not saying that the rest of the country is free from delinquency either. For example, here in Puerto Viejo, we have our fair share of crimes as well. About a month ago, my dad told me that on the Avenida Manaví, which is supposedly a very safe street, there was a guy who was talking on his phone on the sidewalk waiting for a taxi or a car or something, and a motorcycle drove by and tried to snatch his phone from him, which is insane because there's a guard literally standing right there in the plaza where he was at. It makes no sense. And this is why I always recommend to people to not have their phones out while they're on the street. And if that's not bad enough, if you have the bad luck of running into a thief, they will stick you up. It doesn't really matter where you are. And the level they go to is just exaggerated. I've heard stories where people have been robbed, and for fighting back, you know, trying to hold on to their purse or not letting the thief take their phone, they get shot or they get stabbed. It's not even a joke. And if that weren't bad enough, there have even been instances where taxi drivers have been robbed. And when they don't let themselves get robbed, of course they get killed too. And if the taxi driver isn't getting robbed, sometimes the taxi driver will be the one who does the robbing. That's why some people have resorted to calling their friends while they're in the taxi so that if anything goes south, their friend knows exactly where they are. And I really wish that the police would put a stop to it, but they really don't, which just makes the situation much worse. Because in theory, the police know where the dangerous zones are, either where the robbers lurk or even where they live. When you go to specific cities, you will get recommendations of places where you should not go, just like anywhere else in the world. But if the police know where the danger is, where the people who are committing the crimes are, I'm surprised they don't go and stop them. At the same time, I understand their fear. But I think it's ridiculous that you'll be driving down the street, you'll have everything in order, and the police will stop you. But the police will literally see two guys on a motorcycle, no helmet, which is very illegal here, driving the typical suspicious motorcycle, because yes, you can identify robbers based on the motorcycle they drive, and the police won't stop them. Why? Seriously? It's just so dumb. But this is why delinquency runs rampant and why I clearly dislike delinquency here in Ecuador. While I think inaccessibility isn't the best term for this, what I mean by it is the fact that whenever you want to buy something that's not from the country, you have to pay an exorbitant price for it. It's not only ridiculous, but it's insane as well. And while this mainly applies to technology, things such as cell phones or laptops, it also applies to other things as well. For example, my little hobbies corner over there wouldn't even be possible if I didn't have someone to help me get these things over here. Because even the process of getting things over here is an absolute pain in you know where. Tons of people always complain that they buy things on Wish and it either arrives 6 months later or it doesn't arrive at all. And then even ordering on Amazon seems absolutely pointless considering that the fees to get things sent over here are just completely inexcusable. And if all that weren't bad enough, sometimes your stuff might get lost in customs. And I say it that way because there are rumors that sometimes when customs doesn't send your things, it's because they keep them for themselves, which I really hope is just a rumor, but I'm definitely not willing to risk it. And while some of you watching might argue that I should just buy things that are made in Ecuador, I would love to, but I definitely don't remember the last time anyone, Ecuadorian or other, has said, oh, check out this amazing Ecuadorian phone, or look at this amazingly cheap Ecuadorian laptop. No one says that. There are TVs, air conditioners, microwaves, all sorts of other technology that is made here, but in a time when you need to be in touch, there are no phones or laptops that you can find that are nationally made. As far as I've seen, of course. And what's worse is even the phone companies try to rip you off. Like, I literally visited Claro's website for phones, specifically iPhones for the fun of it, and they're selling the iPhone 13 Pro Max as a special offer, special mind you, for $1,646. And it's the lowest storage option. And there are more, of course, but I think you get my point. The good thing is that independent vendors, like my best friend who sells phones and such, sell other phones for cheaper prices. So there are kind of ways to get around this, but even then, most of the time, you won't find anything technology mainly related or hobby related at a cheap price, which is why I really dislike how inaccessible Ecuador is when it comes to these things. And while I do have other minor complaints about Ecuador, I want to hear from you. Is there anything you dislike from Ecuador? Or is there anything you dislike from the place where you live in right now? And remember, don't think that I only dislike things about Ecuador, because in my previous video, I talked about the things that I love about Ecuador. So if you haven't seen that yet, you might want to check it out over here. And remember, if you'd like to support me in future videos, then you can buy me an encebollado on buymeacoffee.com, where I give more information on my future plans, and I try to be a little bit more communicative with everyone over there. So go check it out, and I appreciate the support. Make sure you take care. Don't forget that there are good things and not just bad things in Ecuador. And as always, ace out.